Elena Martinez pulled the sleek black Mercedes into the circular driveway of Blackstone Industries headquarters, checking her watch as she shifted into park. 15 minutes early, just as she preferred. The morning sun reflected off the glass tower's surface, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. She adjusted her chauffeur's cap and straightened her navy uniform jacket, ensuring every detail met the exacting standards her employer demanded. At 28, Elena had been driving for the wealthy elite of Manhattan for nearly 3 years. The pay was decent, the hours predictable, and, most importantly, it allowed her to send money home to her family in Guatemala while pursuing her evening studies in international business. What her clients didn't know was that Elena spoke 7 languages fluently and held a bachelor's degree in economics from Universidad de San Carlos. In America, however, her credentials meant little without proper documentation and connections. The glass doors of Blackstone Industries slid open, and Marcus Blackstone emerged like a storm cloud in an expensive suit. At 45, he had inherited his father's real estate empire and expanded it into a multinational conglomerate worth billions. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went, unfortunately not always in flattering ways. Board meetings were legendary for his explosive temper, and employees often joked that working for Blackstone meant developing thick skin and keeping resumes updated. Marcus approached the Mercedes with his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders to someone on the other end. "I don't care what the Tokyo team thinks about the timeline. If they can't deliver by Friday, find someone who can." He yanked open the rear door and slumped into the leather seat without acknowledging Elena's presence. "Good morning, Mr. Blackstone," Elena said politely, adjusting the rearview mirror to catch his attention. "Where would you like to go today?" Marcus barely glanced up from his phone. "The usual. And try not to hit every pothole between here and Midtown. Some of us have important work to do." He returned to his call, his voice rising with frustration. "What do you mean the contract is in Japanese only? Get someone to translate it immediately." Elena bit her tongue and pulled away from the curb. She had driven Marcus to dozens of meetings over the past 6 months, listening to his phone conversations about deals worth millions of dollars. His arrogance was as consistent as his schedule, treating her like an invisible piece of furniture rather than a human being. She had learned to tune out his condescending tone while focusing on the fascinating details of his business operations. Traffic crawled through Manhattan's morning rush hour, giving Elena plenty of time to overhear Marcus's increasingly agitated conversation. "You're telling me we're going to lose the Yamamoto deal because of a translation issue? Do you have any idea how much money is at stake here?" He slammed his phone down and rubbed his temples, muttering under his breath about incompetent employees. Elena caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackstone, but did you mention needing a Japanese translator?" Marcus looked up sharply, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Since when do chauffeurs eavesdrop on private business conversations?" "I apologize, sir. I couldn't help but notice your frustration. It's just that I speak Japanese, along with several other languages. I thought perhaps I could be of assistance." Marcus let out a harsh laugh. "You speak Japanese? Right. And I suppose you also have a PhD in nuclear physics hidden under that cap." His tone dripped with sarcasm as he leaned back in his seat. "Focus on driving, Maria, or whatever your name is. Leave the business to people who actually understand it." Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but she kept her voice steady. "My name is Elena, Mr. Blackstone. Elena Martinez. And I do speak Japanese, along with Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, French, German, and English." "Of course you do," Marcus replied dismissively, already picking up his phone again. "Next you'll tell me you went to Harvard Business School." He dialed another number, his voice returning to its commanding tone. "Peterson, it's Blackstone. I need you to find me a Japanese translator immediately. Someone who actually knows what they're doing." Elena merged into the left lane, her mind racing. She had studied international business specifically because she understood how language barriers affected global commerce. Her thesis had focused on how cultural miscommunication led to failed business partnerships, particularly between American and Asian companies. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the Meridian Hotel, where Marcus had scheduled a breakfast meeting with potential investors. Elena watched in the mirror as he gathered his briefcase and straightened his tie, preparing to charm people into giving him millions of dollars. The same man who couldn't be bothered to remember her name was about to convince others to trust him with their fortunes. "Pick me up at 11, Marcus ordered as he stepped out of the car. "And Elena?" He paused, using her name for the first time. "Next time, keep the career counseling to yourself. I pay you to drive, not to think." Elena nodded professionally, but inside, she felt a familiar sting of frustration. She watched Marcus disappear through the hotel's revolving door, then pulled away to find parking. This was the reality of her situation, she reminded herself. No matter how educated or capable she was, in Marcus Blackstone's world, she would always be just the help. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Carlos, who was finishing his final year of engineering school in Guatemala City. "Hey sis, got the scholarship
As you can see
interview
from the
next
latest
week.
figures, our
Thanks for
growth
everything.
trajectory is
Love you."
accelerating, particularly
Elena
in the
smiled
Q3
despite her
segment.
mood. This was why she endured Marcus's condescension and worked 12-hour days. Her family's future was worth more than her pride. Elena spent the next 2 hours parked near Central Park, using the time to study for her evening classes. She was working toward an MBA in international business, taking courses 3 nights a week at a community college. Her professors didn't know she was a chauffeur. She had crafted a careful story about working in client services for a financial firm. The truth felt too complicated to explain. At exactly 11 o'clock, Elena pulled up to the hotel entrance. Marcus emerged looking frustrated, his phone conversation clearly not going well. He climbed into the back seat without greeting her, immediately returning to his call. "I don't care how long it takes, Thompson. Find me someone who can properly translate these documents by tomorrow morning. The Yamamoto Group is threatening to walk away from the entire deal." He ended the call and stared out the window, his jaw clenched with anger. Elena glanced in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Blackstone, if you don't mind me asking, what type of documents need translation?" Marcus sighed heavily. "Commercial real estate contracts, joint venture agreements, due diligence reports. Nothing you would understand." He paused, then added grudgingly, "The deal is worth $2 billion, and it's falling apart because my team can't find a qualified translator who understands both legal terminology and business concepts." Elena's pulse quickened. She had translated similar documents during her internship at a law firm in Guatemala City, working with international clients who needed Spanish and English versions of complex agreements. "Mr. Blackstone, I know you don't believe me, but I genuinely could help with this. I've translated business contracts before, and I understand both Japanese business culture and American legal terminology." Marcus turned to look at her directly for the first time in months. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Completely serious, sir. I know my current position doesn't suggest extensive business experience, but I have the skills you need. I could take a look at the documents and provide a sample translation to prove my capabilities." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena's face in the mirror. "What exactly is your educational background?" "I have a bachelor's degree in economics with a focus on international trade, and I'm currently pursuing my MBA. I've worked as a translator for legal and business documents, and I spent 2 years working for a firm that specialized in Latin American and Asian business partnerships." "If you have all these qualifications, what the hell are you doing driving my car?" Elena chose her words carefully. Sometimes life circumstances require us to take positions that don't immediately reflect our capabilities. I needed steady employment while I established myself in New York, and driving gave me that stability. Marcus leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. Elena could practically see the wheels turning in his mind as he weighed his options. His usual translators had failed him, his deadline was approaching, and he was desperate enough to consider any alternative. "Office," he said finally. "We're going back to the office." Elena nodded and pulled into traffic, unsure whether she had just created an opportunity or walked into a disaster. Marcus spent the remainder of the drive making phone calls, but she noticed he kept glancing at her in the mirror with a new expression. For the first time since she had started working for him, he seemed to be actually seeing her as a person rather than a piece of equipment. When they arrived at Blackstone Industries, Marcus paused before getting out of the car. "Elena, bring your identification and any documentation of your education to my office in 10 minutes. If you're lying to me about any of this, you're fired. If you're telling the truth. He left the sentence hanging as he walked toward the building. Elena sat in the driver's seat for a moment, her heart pounding. She reached into her purse and pulled out her carefully preserved university diploma and professional certificates, documents she had carried with her from Guatemala but never expected to use in this context. Everything was about to change, one way or another. She gathered her courage and followed Marcus into the building, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether her hidden talents would finally be recognized or whether she would be looking for a new job by evening. The security guard looked surprised to see the chauffeur heading toward the executive elevators, but Elena kept walking with confidence she didn't entirely feel. As the elevator rose toward the top floor, Elena reflected on the strange turn her day had taken. This morning she had been invisible, just another service provider in Marcus Blackstone's wealthy world. Now she was about to prove that sometimes the most valuable assets come from the most unexpected places. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, where Elena had never been before. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings, and original artwork lined the walls. Marcus's assistant looked up from her desk with obvious confusion as Elena approached. "Mr. Blackstone is expecting me," Elena said confidently, holding her documents folder. The assistant buzzed the intercom. "Sir, your driver is here to see you." "Send her in," came Marcus's voice through the speaker. Elena walked into the corner office, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. Marcus sat behind an enormous mahogany desk covered with contracts and legal documents. For the first time, he gestured for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Let me see those credentials," Marcus said, extending his hand. Elena passed him her diploma and certificates, watching as he examined each document
If we
carefully.
don't move now,
His eyebrows
the
rose
entire
slightly as he
operation
read,
will
and
collapse.
she could see his perception of her shifting in real time. Universidad de San Carlos, bachelor's degree in economics, magna cum laude, he read aloud. Professional translator certification in 5 languages. Commercial law seminar completion. He looked up at her with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. "Why didn't you mention any of this when you applied for the driving position? You weren't hiring for my educational background, Mr. Blackstone. You needed a reliable driver, and I needed steady employment. I provided excellent service in the role you hired me for." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "And you're telling me you can translate complex Japanese business documents?" "I can translate them accurately and quickly, with full understanding of both the legal implications and cultural nuances that affect international business relationships." Marcus reached for a thick folder on his desk. "These are the Yamamoto contracts. 12 pages of legal documentation for a joint venture to develop commercial properties in Tokyo and Los Angeles. My regular translation service said it would take a week to properly translate and verify the documents. The Japanese partners want answers by tomorrow afternoon." Elena accepted the folder and opened it, scanning the first page of dense Japanese text. The documents were indeed complex, covering property rights, profit-sharing agreements, environmental regulations, and construction timelines. However, the legal terminology was familiar from her previous work, and the business concepts were straightforward. "I can have these translated by tomorrow morning," she said confidently. "However, I should mention that there are several cultural considerations in these contracts that might affect the negotiation process, such as Japanese business culture places enormous emphasis on long-term relationships and mutual respect. Some of the language in these contracts suggests the Yamamoto Group feels rushed or pressured by your timeline. They're also including several face-saving clauses that indicate they've had negative experiences with American partners before." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. "You got all that from glancing at the first page?" Cultural context is as important as literal translation in international business. The words tell you what they're saying, but the structure and phrasing tell you what they're really thinking. For the first time since Elena had known him, Marcus Blackstone looked genuinely impressed. "If you can deliver accurate translations by tomorrow morning, I'll pay you $5,000 for the work." Elena's breath caught. $5,000 was more than she made in 2 months as a chauffeur. "That's very generous, Mr. Blackstone." "And Elena?" Marcus stood up and extended his hand. I owe you an apology. I've been less than professional in how I've treated you. That was wrong of me. Elena shook his hand, noting that this was the first time he had ever. Elena's small queen's apartment had never felt more like a professional office than it did at 7 o'clock that evening. She had cleared her kitchen table and arranged the Yamamoto contracts in neat stacks, with her laptop, dictionaries, and legal reference books creating a makeshift translation station. The overhead light cast a focused glow on the Japanese characters that would determine her future with Blackstone Industries. She began with a careful read-through of all 12 pages, making notes about complex terminology and cultural references. The documents were more sophisticated than she had initially realized, involving not just property development, but also technology transfer agreements and environmental compliance standards that varied between Japan and the United States. Each section required precise understanding of both legal systems. Her phone rang at 8:30, interrupting her concentration. The caller ID showed her mother's number in Guatemala City. Hola, mommy. Elena answered, switching to Spanish while keeping her eyes on the contract. Elena, mi amor, how are you? Carlos told me about his scholarship interview. We wanted to thank you for making his education possible. Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest as she thought about the sacrifices her family had made. Her parents had sold their small farm to help pay for her university education, believing she would return to Guatemala and help lift the family out of poverty. Instead, she had followed an opportunity to New York, leaving them to struggle while she drove rich Americans around Manhattan. I'm proud of Carlos, mommy. He's going to be a great engineer. And you, Mija? Are you happy there? You sound tired. Elena looked at the contracts spread across her table, thinking about Marcus Blackstone's surprised expression when he realized she possessed skills he had never bothered to discover. I think things might be changing for me here, mommy. I can't explain everything right now, but I might have a chance to use my education in ways I hadn't expected. That's wonderful, Elena. Your father and I always knew you were meant for something special. Just remember that success means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. After ending the call, Elena returned to her translation work with renewed determination. This wasn't just about proving herself to Marcus Blackstone anymore. It was about honoring the faith her family had placed in her education and creating opportunities that could benefit more people than just herself. The first contract section dealt with property acquisition rights in downtown Tokyo. Elena worked methodically through the legal language, noting that the Japanese version contained several subtle disclaimers that didn't appear in the English summary Marcus had been working from. The Yamamoto Group was protecting themselves against potential changes in zoning regulations and environmental standards, suggesting they had concerns about the project's long-term viability. By midnight, Elena had completed translations of 6 pages and identified 3 potential deal-breakers that Marcus's team had missed entirely. The Japanese partners were requesting guarantees about construction materials that would be extremely difficult for an American company to provide. They also wanted specific assurances about worker safety standards that exceeded typical U.S. requirements. Elena made careful notes about each issue, explaining not just what the contract said but why the Yamamoto Group was making these specific demands. Japanese construction companies had faced international criticism in recent years for environmental violations and worker safety incidents. They were clearly determined to avoid similar problems in their American partnership. She took a break at 1 o'clock, making coffee and stretching her cramped shoulders. Through her apartment window, she could see the Manhattan skyline glittering in the distance. Somewhere in one of those towers, Marcus Blackstone was probably lying awake worried about losing a $2 billion deal. In a few hours, she would either provide him with solutions to save that deal or confirm that it was destined to fail. The remaining 6 pages proved even more complex than the first half. The technology transfer section included specifications for construction equipment and environmental monitoring systems that required specialized technical vocabulary. Elena found herself researching engineering terms and EPA regulations to ensure her translations were completely accurate. At 3 in the morning, she discovered the most significant issue buried in the contract's fine print. The Yamamoto Group was requiring Blackstone Industries to partner with a specific Japanese environmental consulting firm for all phases of the project. This firm, Elena realized after some research, was owned by a subsidiary of Yamamoto's parent company. Essentially, the Japanese partners wanted to control environmental oversight while requiring Blackstone to pay for the service. Elena made detailed notes about this requirement, explaining how it would affect project costs and decision-making authority. She also researched the consulting firm's background, discovering they had a reputation for extremely stringent standards that had delayed or canceled several international projects. This wasn't necessarily malicious, but it represented a significant hidden risk that Marcus's team needed to understand. By 5 in the morning, Elena had completed the full translation along with a 10-page summary of cultural and business considerations. She had identified 7 specific areas where misunderstandings could derail the partnership, along with suggested approaches for addressing each concern. Her eyes burned from hours of close reading, but she felt confident in the quality of her work. She showered and dressed carefully for what might be the most important meeting of her professional life. Instead of her chauffeur's uniform, she chose a conservative business suit she had bought for job interviews, but rarely had occasion to wear. Looking at herself in the mirror, she could hardly believe the transformation from yesterday morning. Elena arrived at Blackstone Industries at 7:30, knowing Marcus typically reached the office early. She found him already at his desk, looking haggard and anxious as he stared at his computer screen. "Elena," he said with obvious relief as she knocked on his open door. "Please tell me you have good news for me." "I have complete news for you, Mr. Blackstone. Whether it's good or bad depends on how you choose to proceed." She placed the translated contracts and her analysis on his desk, along with a printed copy of her summary. Marcus immediately began reading, his expression shifting from hope to concern as he worked through her findings. "Jesus Christ," he muttered after reading the environmental consulting requirement. "They want us to pay their subsidiary to approve or reject our own construction decisions." That's correct, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. Japanese business culture values consensus and shared responsibility. They're not trying to cheat you, exactly. They're trying to ensure the project succeeds according to their definition of success, which includes very high environmental and safety standards. Marcus looked up from the documents. "And you learned all this from translating contracts?" "The contracts told me what they wanted. The research told me why they wanted it. Understanding both is essential for successful negotiation. What do you recommend?" Elena had spent the last hour of her translation work preparing for exactly this question. "I recommend accepting most of their requirements, but proposing modifications that protect your interests. For example, agree to use their environmental consulting firm, but negotiate a cap on fees and a timeline for approvals. Show them you respect their standards while ensuring the project remains financially viable." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Elena with new respect. "You've been driving my car for 6 months, listening to me talk about deals like this every day. What else have you been thinking about my business that you haven't mentioned?" Elena chose her words carefully. "I've observed that you have excellent instincts for identifying profitable opportunities, but your team sometimes struggles with cultural considerations in international deals. You approach negotiations like competitions to be won rather than relationships to be built. That works well in many American business contexts, but it creates problems with Asian and European partners. Give me an example. 3 weeks ago, you lost the Chun manufacturing deal. Your team offered them excellent financial terms, but they walked away because they felt rushed and disrespected. Chin's representatives mentioned feeling pressured during phone calls I overheard. In Chinese business culture, being rushed implies the relationship isn't valued." Marcus stared at her. "You've been analyzing my failed deals?" "I've been listening and learning. It's difficult to ignore patterns when you hear the same types of problems repeatedly." Marcus stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Elena, I need to ask you something directly. Are you interested in a different position with this company?" Elena's heart began racing. "What type of position?" "I don't know yet. But someone with your language skills, cultural knowledge, and analytical ability could be incredibly valuable for our international operations. This Yamamoto deal is just the beginning. We're looking at projects in Brazil, Germany, and China over the next year. I would be very interested in discussing that possibility, Mr. Blackstone." "Good. But first, we need to save this Japanese deal." I'm meeting with the Yamamoto representatives at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I want you there to provide cultural guidance and handle any translation issues that arise. Elena felt a mixture of excitement and terror. I should mention that I've never participated in a business negotiation at this level before. Neither had I once upon a time. Everyone starts somewhere. Marcus returned to his desk and picked up Elena's analysis. This is professional quality work, Elena. If you can help me close this deal, you'll have proven your value to this company beyond any doubt. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus introduced Elena to his legal team as a cultural consultant and translator, carefully avoiding mention of her previous role as his driver. Elena found herself fielding questions about Japanese business etiquette, contract interpretation, and negotiation strategies from lawyers who earn more in a month than she had made all year. Remember, Elena told the team as they prepared for the meeting, Japanese business people view contracts as the beginning of a relationship, not the end of a negotiation. They expect ongoing collaboration and flexibility as circumstances change. Your goal isn't to win this meeting. It's to demonstrate that Blackstone Industries will be a trustworthy long-term partner. Marcus nodded approvingly. What else do we need to know? Arrive exactly on time, not early or late. Bow slightly when introduced, and accept business cards with both hands. Don't interrupt or contradict them directly during presentations. If you disagree with something, say you need time to consider their perspective. Show respect for their experience and expertise, even when you're confident your approach is better. At 1:30, Elena accompanied Marcus and his team to the conference room where they would meet the Yamamoto representatives. She had never been in this part of the building before, with its polished marble floors and original artwork. 6 months ago, she had been parking Marcus's car in the basement garage. Now she was advising him on how to save a $2 billion business deal. The Yamamoto team arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. 5 Japanese businessmen in identical dark suits, led by an elderly gentleman Elena recognized from newspaper photos as Hiroshi Yamamoto, the company's founder and CEO. Elena watched Marcus remember her advice about bowing and accepting business cards properly, noting how the Japanese team's posture relaxed slightly in response to his respectful approach. Mr. Blackstone, Yamamoto said in accented but excellent English, we appreciate your willingness to meet with us again. However, we must be honest that we have concerns about proceeding with this partnership. Marcus glanced at Elena before responding. Mr. Yamamoto, we share your commitment to ensuring this project succeeds according to the highest possible standards. We've reviewed your contract requirements carefully, and we believe we can address your concerns while creating a profitable partnership for both companies. Elena noticed that Marcus's tone was completely different from his usual aggressive negotiating style. He sounded respectful and collaborative, exactly the approach she had recommended. Yamamoto looked surprised. You have reviewed our requirements? We were informed that your team needed more time for translation and analysis. We had excellent assistance with translation, Marcus replied, gesturing toward Elena. Ms. Martinez provided not only accurate translations, but also valuable insights into the cultural considerations behind your requirements. Yamamoto turned to Elena with obvious interest. Ms. Martinez, you speak Japanese? Hi, Yamamoto-san. Elena replied in fluent Japanese. It would be an honor to assist with communication during today's meeting. The effect on the Japanese team was immediate and dramatic. They exchanged quick glances and began speaking rapidly in Japanese among themselves. Elena listened carefully, noting their surprise that an American company had hired a translator who understood cultural nuances rather than just literal language. They're impressed, Elena whispered to Marcus in English. They said most American companies use translation services that miss important cultural meanings. Yamamoto smiled for the first time since arriving. Ms. Martinez, perhaps you could help us understand Mr. Blackstone's perspective on our environmental consulting requirements? Elena looked at Marcus, who nodded for her to proceed. This was the moment she had prepared for throughout the long night of translation work. Yamamoto-san, she began in Japanese. Mr. Blackstone recognizes that Yamamoto Corporation has built its reputation on exceptional environmental and safety standards. He wants to learn from your expertise rather than simply meeting minimum American requirements. However, He also needs to ensure the project remains financially viable for both partners. She paused to let Marcus's legal team understand what she had said, then continued in English. Mr. Blackstone proposes accepting your environmental consulting requirements with some modifications to protect both companies' interests. He suggests establishing fee caps and approval timelines that ensure thorough review without creating unlimited liability. Yamamoto's team listened intently as Elena translated Marcus's specific proposals. She watched their faces carefully, noting which suggestions created interest and which caused concern. When they began discussing among themselves in rapid Japanese, she translated their conversation for Marcus in real time. They like the fee cap idea, but they're worried about the timeline restrictions. They're saying American companies usually rush environmental reviews, which creates problems later. They want assurance that deadlines won't compromise thoroughness. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Elena, please tell them that we're willing to establish realistic timelines based on their expertise. We want their honest assessment of how long proper environmental review requires for each phase of the project. Elena translated Marcus's response, adding cultural context that emphasized Blackstone's respect for Yamamoto's experience. The Japanese team's body language continued to improve as the conversation progressed, their initial skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. Ms. Martinez, Yamamoto said in English, you understand both American and Japanese business perspectives very well. Have you worked on international partnerships before? Elena felt every eye in the room focused on her. I have educational and professional experience with international business, Yamamoto said. However, today is my first opportunity to apply that experience to a partnership of this magnitude. And what is your role with Blackstone Industries? Elena glanced at Marcus, unsure how to answer. 6 hours ago, she had been his chauffeur. Now she was facilitating the most important negotiation of his year. Marcus spoke before she could respond. Ms. Martinez is our newest international business consultant. She specializes in cultural communication and contract analysis for our Asian partnerships. Elena's breath caught at hearing her new role announced so definitively, but she maintained her professional composure. I'm honored to work with both teams to create a successful partnership, she said in both Japanese and English. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, with Elena serving as both translator and cultural interpreter. She helped both sides understand not just what the other was saying, but why they were saying it. When disagreements arose, she suggested compromise approaches that allowed both companies to protect their essential interests. By 4:30, they had reached preliminary agreement on all major contract terms. The environmental consulting requirements remained, but with fee structures and timelines that protected Blackstone's financial interests. More importantly, both teams seemed genuinely optimistic about working together. Mr. Blackstone, Yamamoto said as the meeting concluded, we look forward to finalizing this partnership. Ms. Martinez has helped us understand that Blackstone Industries approaches international business with proper respect for cultural differences. After the Japanese team departed, Marcus's legal team gathered around Elena with expressions of amazement. That was incredible, said Janet Morrison, Blackstone's chief counsel. I've never seen a negotiation go that smoothly with an Asian partner. You managed to translate not just language, but entire thought processes. Elena felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and praise. 24 hours earlier, these same people had walked past her in the lobby without a second glance. Now they were treating her like a valued colleague. Marcus waited until his team had left before speaking to Elena privately. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that. You didn't just translate for us. You helped both sides understand each other. That's what international business should be, Mr. Blackstone. Finding ways for different approaches to create mutual benefit rather than treating differences as obstacles. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying Elena's face. I owe you more than an apology, Elena. I owe you recognition of what you've accomplished here. You saved this deal, and probably saved my company several $1 million in the process. I'm glad I could help, sir. The question now is what happens next. I meant what I said about offering you a position in international business. But I need to know if you're genuinely interested in changing careers or if this was just a one-time demonstration. 3 months after the Yamamoto deal closed successfully, Elena Martinez stood in her new corner office on the 38th floor of Blackstone Industries, reviewing contracts for a development project in Sao Paulo. The view from her windows encompassed the same Manhattan skyline she had admired from her Queens apartment, but everything else about her life had transformed beyond recognition. Her official title was Director of International Business Development, with a salary that had increased her income by 400% overnight. Marcus had insisted on giving her stock options in the company, understanding that her contributions would extend far beyond any single deal. The chauffeur's uniform had been replaced by tailored business suits, and her tiny apartment had given way to a spacious two-bedroom unit in Manhattan with room for a proper home office. Elena, the German team, is online too, announced Jennifer Park, Elena's new assistant. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that she now had someone managing her schedule the same way she had once managed Marcus's transportation needs. "Thank you, Jennifer. Please tell them I'll be with them in 5 minutes." Elena finished reviewing the Brazilian Environmental Impact Assessment, making notes in Portuguese that would help the Sao Paulo partners understand American regulatory requirements. The skills that had seemed worthless when she was driving Marcus's Mercedes now formed the foundation of her professional success. Every day brought new challenges that required exactly the combination of linguistic ability, cultural understanding, and analytical thinking she had developed through years of education and experience. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos, who was now enrolled in his engineering program with a full scholarship. "Sis, the whole family is so proud of you. Papa showed your business card to everyone at church last Sunday. Love you." Elena smiled, remembering the conversation with her parents when she had explained her career change. Her mother had cried with joy, understanding that her daughter's sacrifices had finally been rewarded. The German call involved a complex negotiation for a renewable energy project in Hamburg. Elena switched effortlessly between English and German as she mediated between Blackstone's aggressive American approach and the methodical German preference for extensive documentation and risk analysis. Her Muller, Elena said in fluent German, "Blackstone Industries values your thorough approach to project planning. We would like to propose a hybrid timeline that accommodates both American efficiency and German precision." She spent 40 minutes on the call, eventually reaching agreement on a development schedule that satisfied both sides. The Germans appreciated having someone who understood their cultural preference for detailed planning, while Marcus's team got the accelerated timeline they needed for financial projections. After ending the call, Elena walked down the hall to Marcus's office for their daily briefing. Their working relationship had evolved dramatically since the Yamamoto negotiation. Marcus now treated her as a trusted advisor rather than an employee, seeking her input on strategic decisions and cultural considerations for all international projects. "How did the Hamburg call go?" Marcus asked as Elena took her usual seat across from his desk. "Very well. They've agreed to our modified timeline, and they're excited about the environmental technology transfer aspects of the partnership. However, I should mention that they're expecting much more detailed environmental impact studies than we typically provide for American projects." "Can we handle that?" "Absolutely, but it will require hiring additional environmental consultants and extending our preparation timeline by 6 weeks. The cost increase will be approximately $300,000, but the German partners are willing to share that expense because they view it as essential for regulatory approval." Marcus nodded approvingly. "What's your recommendation?" "Accept their requirements, and use this as an opportunity to develop environmental assessment capabilities that will benefit all our international projects. Several of our other European partners have mentioned similar concerns about American environmental standards." "Approved. What else do we have today?" Elena consulted her tablet. "The Beijing team wants to schedule a video conference about the Shanghai project. They're requesting someone who speaks Mandarin for the technical discussions. Also, the Sao Paulo partners have questions about American construction codes that require Portuguese translation. Handle both of those however you think best. Your judgment on international matters is better than mine at this point." Elena still felt surprised when Marcus deferred to her expertise so completely. 6 months ago, he hadn't trusted her opinion about traffic routes. Now he was giving her authority over multi-million-dollar international negotiations. "There's one other thing, Marcus. I've been thinking about the expansion into Latin American markets that we discussed last month. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What are your thoughts? I believe we're approaching it from the wrong direction. Instead of trying to export American development models to Latin American cities, we should be learning from successful Latin American urban planning strategies and adapting them for North American markets. Explain. Elena pulled out a folder containing research she had compiled over the past weeks. Cities like Medellin, Colombia, and Curitiba, Brazil, have developed innovative approaches to sustainable urban development that address problems American cities haven't solved effectively. They've created public transportation systems, green space integration, and community development strategies that could revolutionize American urban planning. You're suggesting we reverse the typical model? Exactly. Instead of teaching Latin American cities to build like American cities, we could learn from their successes and bring those innovations to American markets. It would position Blackstone as a leader in sustainable urban development while creating genuine partnerships rather than one-sided technology transfers. Marcus studied the research Elena had prepared, his expression growing increasingly interested. This is brilliant, Elena. How long have you been developing this concept? Honestly, I've been thinking about it since my undergraduate studies in Guatemala. I watched American companies try to impose North American solutions on Latin American problems, usually with mixed results. The most successful international partnerships I observed involved mutual learning rather than one-directional knowledge transfer. Could you develop this into a formal business plan? I could have a preliminary plan ready within 2 weeks. However, I'd recommend sending a research team to visit successful projects in Medellin and Curitiba before making final decisions. Understanding these innovations requires seeing them in operation, not just reading about them. Who would you recommend for that research team? Elena paused, realizing Marcus was asking her to suggest personnel for a major strategic initiative. I think the team should include urban planning specialists, environmental engineers, and someone with deep cultural knowledge of Latin American business practices. Someone like you. Elena felt her pulse quicken. If you think my perspective would be valuable, I'd be honored to lead that research mission. Marcus smiled. Elena, 6 months ago you were driving me to meetings where I made decisions about projects like this. Now you're proposing strategic initiatives that could reshape this company's entire approach to international development. Do you realize how extraordinary that transformation has been? I realize how grateful I am for the opportunity to demonstrate what I've always been capable of accomplishing. What I'm realizing is that there are probably thousands of people like you, working in positions that don't utilize their full potential simply because those capabilities aren't immediately obvious to employers. Elena nodded. That's true in every industry, Marcus. Talent doesn't always come in the packages we expect to find it. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Blackstone Industries needs to develop better systems for identifying and developing international talent. Not just people with impressive resumes, but people with real cultural knowledge and language skills who might be working in other roles. What are you proposing? I want you to develop a new division within the company. International talent development, focused on finding and training people with cultural and linguistic capabilities that could benefit our global operations. You would have authority to hire translators, cultural consultants, and business development specialists from non-traditional backgrounds. Elena stared at Marcus, hardly believing what she was hearing. You want me to create an entire division? I want you to systematize what happened with your own career development. Find other talented people who haven't been recognized because they're working outside traditional corporate structures. Then, give them opportunities to prove their value to international business. Elena thought about all the brilliant people she had met who were working as drivers, servers, cleaning staff, and other service positions while possessing advanced degrees and specialized skills that American employers never bothered to discover. That could revolutionize how companies approach international staffing. Exactly. And it could give Blackstone a significant competitive advantage in global markets. While other companies struggle to find qualified international staff, we would be developing talent that other firms don't even know exists. Marcus, this is an incredible opportunity. When would you want me to start developing this division? Immediately. I'm authorizing an initial budget of $2 million for the first year, with expansion possible based on results. You'll report directly to me, with authority to hire staff and develop partnerships with educational institutions and community organizations. Elena felt overwhelmed by the scope of the opportunity Marcus was offering. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the job. And Elena? Marcus stood up and extended his hand. Say you'll help me make sure this company never again misses opportunities because we fail to recognize talent when it doesn't fit traditional expectations. Elena shook his hand, thinking about the conversation that had started this transformation. I accept, Marcus. And I promise that Blackstone Industries will become known as a company that values capability over credentials and potential over pedigree. After leaving Marcus's office, Elena returned to her own workspace to begin planning the new division. She opened her laptop and started creating lists of potential recruitment sources: community colleges with international student populations, immigrant services organizations, language schools, and cultural associations. Each represented a pool of talented individuals who might be working beneath their potential simply because traditional corporate recruiting never reached them. Her phone rang, interrupting her planning. The caller ID showed an international number from Guatemala. Elena, mi amor, came her mother's voice. How is my successful daughter today? I'm wonderful, Mommy. Actually, I just received another promotion. I'm going to be creating a new division of the company. Another promotion? Elena, we can hardly believe how quickly your life has changed. It feels like a dream sometimes, Mommy. But I want you to know that none of this would have been possible without the sacrifices you and Papa made for my education. Everything I've accomplished is built on the foundation you gave me. We always knew you were meant for something special, Mija. But tell me, are you happy? Success means nothing without happiness. Elena looked around her office, thinking about the projects she was managing, the teams she was leading, and the new division she would soon be creating. I'm happy, Mommy. For the first time since I came to America, I'm using all the skills and knowledge I worked so hard to develop. I feel like I'm finally becoming the person I was meant to be. That's all we ever wanted for you, Elena. To see you flourish and use your gifts to help others. After ending the call, Elena walked to her office window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere in this city were hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people like her former self, educated, capable, multilingual individuals working in positions that didn't reflect their full potential. In 6 months, she would have the authority and resources to find those people and offer them opportunities to transform their careers. She thought about Marcus's journey as well, from an arrogant executive who dismissed his chauffeur as irrelevant to a leader who was willing to revolutionize his company's approach to talent development. People could change and grow when circumstances challenged their assumptions about others. Elena's assistant knocked on her office door. Ms. Martinez, the Sao Paulo team is ready for their call. Thank you, Jennifer. Please tell them I'll be right with them. Elena gathered her notes for the Brazilian negotiation, switching her mindset to Portuguese and Latin American business culture. Each call, each project, each successful international partnership proved the value of cultural understanding and linguistic capability in global business. Soon, she would have the opportunity to demonstrate that value systematically across multiple projects and partnerships. As she prepared to join the call, Elena reflected on the profound changes that had transformed her life in such a short period. She had started as an invisible service provider, dismissed and underestimated by the very people who needed her skills most desperately. Through persistence, preparation, and one crucial moment of courage, she had revealed her true capabilities and convinced others to invest in her potential. Now she would have the opportunity to create that same transformation for others. The International Talent Development Division would become a bridge between untapped human potential and corporate need, proving that the most valuable assets often come from the most unexpected sources. Elena smiled as she connected to the video call with the Sao Paulo development team. Boa tarde, pessoal, she began in fluent Portuguese. Thank you for your patience. Let's discuss how we can make this project beneficial for all our communities. As the negotiation proceeded, Elena found herself thinking about the broader implications of what she was building. This wasn't just about individual career advancement or corporate profits. It was about creating systems that recognized human potential regardless of its packaging. that valued cultural knowledge as much as technical expertise, and that understood language skills as strategic business assets rather than convenient services. 6 months ago, she had been a chauffeur whose capabilities were invisible to the people around her. Today, she was an executive with authority to ensure that other talented individuals wouldn't remain invisible for years the way she had. The transformation was complete, but, more importantly, it was sustainable and replicable. Elena Martinez had not only changed her own life, she had created a model that could change how American businesses identified and developed international talent. Sometimes the most profound revolutions begin with a single conversation between two people willing to see each other's potential rather than their limitations. As the Sao Paulo negotiation concluded successfully, with agreements that would benefit both American and Brazilian partners, Elena felt confident that her new division would create similar success stories across multiple industries and cultures. The girl who had left Guatemala with dreams of international business success had finally found her place in the global economy, and she was determined to help others find theirs as well. Elena thought about her small apartment in Queens, her evening MBA classes, and the phone calls home to Guatemala where her family counted on her financial support. She thought about 6 months of being invisible, driving Marcus around the city while listening to him conduct business worth more money than she could imagine. Mr. Blackstone, I've been preparing for this opportunity my entire adult life. Today was just the first time circumstances allowed me to demonstrate what I'm capable of accomplishing. Marcus smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she had ever seen from him. In that case, Elena Martinez, welcome to the executive team of Blackstone Industries. We have a lot of work to do together. Offered her even basic courtesy. Thank you, Mr. Blackstone. I appreciate that. As Elena left his office with the contracts tucked securely in her bag, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes opportunities came from the most unexpected directions. She had taken a job as a chauffeur to support her family and pursue her education, never imagining it would lead to proving her professional worth to one of New York's most powerful businessmen. Now she had less than 18 hours to translate the most important documents of Marcus Blackstone's current business dealings. If she succeeded, it wouldn't just mean $5,000. It would mean stepping out of the invisible service role she had accepted and into the professional world where her skills and education could finally be recognized. Elena headed home to her small Queens apartment, her mind already working through the complex legal language she would need to convert from Japanese to English. She had been underestimated her entire life in America, but tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Marcus Blackstone and his entire company would discover exactly what Elena Martinez was capable of accomplishing.